It was the first great city of Sri Lanka. Founded over 2000 years ago, it was once a sacred city of towering stupas and ancient monasteries. Yet, in the 10th century, it was attacked and abandoned, its once great monasteries left in ruins. If you have never heard the name before, I'm talking about Anuradhapura. Hello everybody, my name is Timothy and I want to welcome you to the Asian Civilisations channel. In today's video, we are exploring Anuradhapura, a city of ancient ruins and since 1982 a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But we are not just joining the thousands of tourists that visit it each year. We are going to uncover the story of Anuradhapura, a place where history and legend meet. So, if you are ready, let's get started. Prologue: The Lost City in the Jungle. Hidden deep within the large heart of Sri Lanka lies the ancient city of Anuradhapura, a place where history and legend intertwine. Towering stone stupas rise above the treetops, moss-covered stone walls trace the outlines of long-forgotten monasteries, and at the very heart of the city, a sacred tree, said to be the oldest historically documented tree in the world, still stands, lovingly tended as it had been for over 2000 years. I remember standing beneath the spreading branches of that very tree, the Sri Bodhi, thinking how incredible it was that something so ancient, so deeply entwined with the story of Buddha itself, still thrives in the modern world. But Anuradhapura is more than just a place of pilgrimage. It is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in all of South Asia, and for more than 1,000 years, it was the royal capital of ancient Sri Lanka. Anuradhapura was not built overnight. Its story stretches back over 2 millennia, beginning with a legendary founder and a small settlement that would one day become the heart of a powerful kingdom. From there, it grew into a city of monumental stupas, vast irrigation works, and bustling markets that traded with India, China, and even Rome. Yet, like so many great cities of antiquity, Anuradhapura too had its fall. After centuries of glory, it was abandoned, left to be reclaimed by the jungle, its stone monuments standing silent testimony to a forgotten age. In this video, I invite you to join me as we explore the rise, the zenith, and the decline of Anuradhapura. We'll uncover the stories of kings and monks, of battles and pilgrimages, and of a civilization that flourished in the shadow of a sacred tree. This is the story of Anuradhapura, the ancient kingdom of Sri Lanka. Chapter 1: The Birth of a Kingdom, Pandukabaya, and the founding of Anuradhapura. The story of Anuradhapura begins not with grand monuments or mighty armies, but with a single figure, a king named Pandukabaya. According to Sri Lankan chronicles like the Mahavamsa, Pandukabaya was the first ruler to establish Anuradhapura as a permanent capital sometime in the 4th century BCE. But as with much of early Sri Lankan history, fact and legend blend seamlessly. As the legend goes, Pandukabaya was born into a royal family but grew up in hiding due to palace intrigues that threatened his life. After years of struggle, he eventually triumphed over his uncles and unified the region. Once in power, he selected the site of Anuradhapura, recognizing its strategic location and abundant resources. There, he laid out the first planned city in Sri Lanka's history. What's fascinating to me, standing amidst the vast ruins today, is imagining the city as it must have looked in Pandukabaya's time, a modern settlement yet already carefully organized. Historical accounts mention fortifications, reservoirs, and even cemeteries, suggesting a city that was both practical and symbolic, a center of political power and social order. Pandukabaya is also remembered for his inclusivity. He recognized and formalized the role of local communities, including indigenous groups like the Yakas, integrating them into his kingdom structure. In many ways, this marked the beginning of a uniquely Sri Lankan identity, forged through accommodation rather than conquest alone. Thus, under Pandukabaya's rule, Anuradhapura transformed from a simple settlement into the beating heart of an emerging civilization, a capital destined to endure for over 1,000 years. In the next chapter, we'll see how this young city would soon encounter an idea that would forever shape its destiny, the arrival of Buddhism. Chapter 2: The Arrival of Buddhism, Mahinda and the Bodhi Tree. If there's a single moment that transformed Anuradhapura from a royal capital into a sacred city, it was the arrival of Buddhism. This wasn't just the introduction of a new religion, it was the planting of an idea that would shape the city's identity for centuries to come. According to tradition, during the reign of King Devanampiya in the 3rd century BCE, a royal mission arrived from India. Leading that mission was Mahinda, a Buddhist monk who was none other than the son of the great Indian Emperor Ashoka. The encounter between Mahinda and Devanampiya is said to have taken place in Mihintale, just outside Anuradhapura. The king, intrigued by the monk's teachings, embraced Buddhism not just as a personal faith, but as a guiding principle for governance and society. It was a momentous decision. From that point onward, Anuradhapura wasn't merely a political capital, it became the spiritual heart of Sri Lanka. One of the most tangible symbols of this transformation is something I saw myself. The Sri Mahabodhi, the sacred fig tree planted from a cutting of the original Bodhi tree under which the Buddha attained enlightenment in India. Brought to Anuradhapura by Sangamita, Mahinda's sister, this tree is not just an ancient relic, it's a living link to the formative moment in Sri Lankan history. Standing there beneath its ancient branches, one cannot help but feel a sense of continuity, a connection stretching back over 2 millennia. Buddhist monks soon established the city's first monastery, the Mahavihara, which became the center of Theravada Buddhist scholarship. The arrival of Buddhism set in motion a wave of monumental construction, intellectual flourishing, and cultural development that would define Anuradhapura's golden age. In the next chapter, we'll explore how Anuradhapura transformed into a truly sacred city, one dominated by the massive stupas and monasteries that still stand today. Chapter 3: Building a Sacred City, Monasteries and Dagobas. With Buddhism firmly established, Anuradhapura began its transformation from royal capital to sacred city. This was not a symbolic shift alone, it was a physical one. Under royal patronage, the city's skyline began to change, dominated by vast dagobas or stupas, sprawling monasteries, and intricately planned ceremonial spaces. Even today, walking through the ruins, one can sense the scale of what ancient Anuradhapura became. The first major construction was the Mahavihara, the main monastery aligned with the Theravada school of Buddhism. It served not just as a religious center, but as a seat of learning, drawing monks and scholars from across the region. Over time, other monasteries like Abhayagiri and Jetavana would rise, each competing in influence and prestige. But what truly catches the eye, even after centuries of decay, are the stupas. The Tuparama Dagoba, said to enshrine a relic of the Buddha himself, was the first of these great structures. But later kings would think bigger. Massive stupas such as the Ruwanvelisaya and Jetavanaramaya stands as marvels of ancient engineering, brick monuments so enormous they rival the Egyptian pyramids in scale. I remember standing beside the Jetavanaramaya, contemplating the sheer ambition behind its construction. Millions of bricks, labor stretching across years, and all to enshrine relics, physical reminders of the Buddha, the symbols of royal power fused with spiritual legitimacy. The architecture of Anuradhapura was never just for show. The layout of its monasteries, the symmetry of its stupas, and the careful design of processional routes were all deliberate, blending spiritual symbolism with practical considerations for worship and pilgrimage. Over centuries, Anuradhapura evolved into more than a city. It became a living mandala, a sacred diagram rendered in stone and earth. In the next chapter, we'll step back from the religious landscape to examine the kings themselves, the rulers who oversaw Anuradhapura's growth and maintained its status as the center of the kingdom. Chapter 4: Kings and Kingdoms, the early rulers of Anuradhapura. Anuradhapura was not built by monks alone. Behind the rise of this ancient city stood a long succession of kings, some visionaries, others ruthless, but all instrumental in shaping its destiny. From the time of Pandukabaya, kingship in Sri Lanka became intimately tied to both statecraft and the guardianship of Buddhism. It's a pattern we see reflected throughout the city's history. After Pandukabaya, rulers like Muttasiva and Devanampiyatissa continued consolidating the kingdom, strengthening the city's infrastructure and reinforcing its religious significance. Devanampiyatissa in particular stands out not just for embracing Buddhism, but for aligning his kingship with the ideals of Dharma or righteous rule. Over time, the kings of Anuradhapura became more than political leaders. They were seen as defenders of the faith, patrons of temples, builders of stupas, and protectors of the Sangha, the monastic community. This close intertwining of throne and temple gave Anuradhapura a unique identity. It was simultaneously a royal capital and a sacred city. Yet, this system wasn't without its tensions. Royal patronage could shift between rival monastic complexes, with kings sometimes favoring the conservative Mahavihara and at times empowering the more progressive Abhayagiri monks. In a sense, religious rivalry was a mirror of political strategy. What strikes me, reflecting on the history of these early rulers, is how much their legacy were measured not just in conquest or wealth, but in the temples they built and the religious reforms they enacted. To rule Anuradhapura was to rule in service of both the people and the Dharma. And yet, not every king was remembered fondly. Power struggles, palace intrigues, and periodic assassinations remind us that this was a human realm as prone to ambition and betrayal as any other ancient kingdom. In the next chapter, we'll meet the king who came to embody the ideal of a warrior monarch and national hero, Dutugemunu, whose reign marked the high point of Anuradhapura's royal power. Chapter 5, Dutugemunu, Warrior King and National Hero. Among the long line of kings who ruled from Anuradhapura, one name rises above all others, Dutugemunu. In Sri Lanka memory and national identity, he stands as the archetypal warrior king, a unifier of the island and a builder of monuments that still inspire all today. Dutugemunu's story is one of both war and piety. According to the chronicles, he was both a prince of the southern kingdom of Ruhuna at the time when Anuradhapura itself was ruled by Ilara, a Tamil king for South India. Ilara, though respected for his justice, was nonetheless seen as a foreign ruler. From a young age, Dutugemunu was determined to reclaim Anuradhapura and unify the island under Sinhala Buddhist leadership. His campaign was long and brutal. Battle after battle, fortress after fortress, Dutugemunu fought his way northward. His war elephants, particularly the famed elephant Kandula, became legendary. Eventually, in a climatic duel, Dutugemunu defeated Ilara, who, in a mark of respect, was given a royal funeral. It's a poignant reminder that even amidst conquest, the codes of kingship and honor remained. But Dutugemunu was not remembered solely for his conquest. Upon securing the throne of Anuradhapura, he turned to religion. It was during his reign that the great Ruwanveliseya stupa was constructed, a monumental structure of gleaming white stone said to enshrine the relics of the Buddha himself. Standing before it today, I found it almost impossible not to feel humbled by its sheer scale and symmetry. It's more than a monument. It's Dutugemunu's declaration of faith and power rendered in stone. Dutugemunu also supported the Sangha, restored monastic institutions, and promoted Buddhist teachings. His reign set the model for the ideal Sri Lankan king, a blend of warrior and patron, defender of both territory and faith. Yet, even as we celebrate his legacy, it's worth acknowledging that much of what we know of Dutugemunu comes from chronicles written centuries after his death, narratives that blend history with national myth-making. Still, in the ruins of Anuradhapura, his story feels real enough. In the next chapter, we'll step away from the royal courts to examine one of Anuradhapura's greatest achievements, the hydraulic wonders that sustain its civilization. Chapter 6, The Age of Irrigation, Tanks and Technological Wonders. If there's one aspect of Anuradhapura that never fails to impress me, is the hydraulic engineering. Long before modern technology, the ancient Sinhalese developed a sophisticated network of reservoirs, canals, and sluice gates, systems so advanced that they sustained Anuradhapura's population for over a millennium. Known locally as Weewas, these reservoirs were more than just water storage. They were massive, man-made lakes carefully designed to harness seasonal rains and redistribute water across the dry plains of northern Sri Lanka. The scale of some of these viwas is staggering. The Nuwara Viwa, Tisa Viwa, and later the Kala Viwa are among the largest, covering hundreds of hectares. As I walked along the ancient embankments, what struck me was the sheer audacity of it all. These weren't minor works of irrigation, they were state projects on a monumental scale, requiring coordinated labor, precise planning, and generations of maintenance. Water wasn't just practical, it was political. Control of irrigation systems was control of life itself. Kings who built and restored tanks secured not only agricultural prosperity but also their legitimacy as protectors of the people. It's telling that many kings are remembered as much for their hydraulic works as for their temples and conquests. Beyond the tanks themselves, the city's networks of canals and sluices demonstrates advanced understanding of flow control and sediment management. Some sluice mechanisms are so precisely engineered that they still function today. These hydraulic marvels didn't just support farming, they shaped the entire landscape. Anuradhapura wasn't a city that grew in spite of its environment, it thrived because its rulers learned to master it. In many ways, the success of Anuradhapura's irrigation system underpinned its golden age. Without it, the city's monasteries and markets, its monuments and armies could not have been sustained. In the next chapter, we'll turn from the fields and tanks to the trade routes, exploring how Anuradhapura connected itself to the wider world. Chapter 7: A Cosmopolitan City, Trade and Foreign Relations. When we think of Anuradhapura, we often picture an ancient Buddhist city, serene, introspective, and perhaps isolated. But in reality, Anuradhapura was anything but insular. It was a cosmopolitan hub connected by land and sea to networks that stretched across India, China, and even the Roman Empire. From its strategic position in the heart of the city, Anuradhapura controlled access to Sri Lanka's northern ports, notably Mantai, on the northwest coast. Through these ports, the city traded with merchants from South India, the Persian Gulf, and as far west as the Mediterranean. Roman coins unearthed in Sri Lanka speak of this long-distance trade, tangible reminders that goods from Anuradhapura once reached distant shores. What was traded? Sri Lanka's reputation rested on its fine spices, particularly cinnamon, as well as precious gems, pearls, elephants, and luxury textiles. In return, Anuradhapura imported not just goods but ideas, religious concepts, artistic styles, and technological innovations flowed in from India and Southeast Asia. Inscriptions and architectural influences reveal that Indian culture, especially from Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, left deep marks on the city's development. Yet, Anuradhapura maintained a distinctly Sri Lankan identity, adapting foreign influences without being overwhelmed by them. To walk through the ancient marketplaces of Anuradhapura, as I once did, is to imagine the sounds of many languages, Pali, Tamil, Prakrit, and perhaps even fragments of Greek or Latin, spoken by traders seeking pearls or elephants for distant courts. What this tells us is that Anuradhapura's prosperity wasn't based solely on agriculture or religious devotion. It was also built on commerce. The city's wealth, much of which funded its great religious monuments and hydraulic works, flowed from trade. In the next chapter, we'll return to the city's spiritual life, exploring the rise of monastic power and the rivalries between the great monasteries that would shape Anuradhapura's religious landscape. Chapter 8: The Rise of Monastic Power, Mahavihara, Abhayagiri, and Jetavana. As Anuradhapura grew into a sacred city, power was no longer confined to the royal palace. Increasingly, real influence came to the hands of the monasteries, vast religious institutions whose reach extended into every aspect of life in the kingdom. At the heart of this religious landscape stood three great monastic complexes: Mahavihara, Abhayagiri, and later Jetavana. The Mahavihara, the oldest of the three, was conservative in its doctrine and closely aligned to the orthodox Theravada school of Buddhism. It positioned itself as the guardian of tradition, preserving what it considered the true teachings of the Buddha. But in time, challenges arose. The Abhayagiri monastery, founded by King Valagamba after reclaiming his throne from South Indian invaders, became a powerful rival. Abhayagiri monks were more receptive to new ideas, engaging with Mahayana concepts and even esoteric practices. This monastery drew patronage from kings who sought to counterbalance the conservative power of the Mahavihara. Later still, the Jetavana monastery entered the scene, further fragmenting religious authority within the city. Each monastery commanded vast resources, owned lands, and attracted thousands of monks and students. What fascinates me about Anuradhapura's religious history is that these rivalries were not merely theological debates. They were contests for political power. Kings would sometimes align with one faction over another, using religious patronage as a tool of governance. At times, tensions ran high. Chronicles mention schisms, disputes over relics, and even accusations of heresy. Yet, these rivalries also spurred growth. Each monastery sought to outdo the other, leading to ever grander stupas, larger libraries, and more elaborate rituals. Walking through the ruins today, you can still sense the scale of these complexes. Massive stone pillars, ruined image houses, and meditation platforms mark the footprints of what were once bustling centers of religious, intellectual, and political life. In the next chapter, we'll see how external pressures, particularly from South India, began to strain this powerful city as invaders from across the sea turned their gaze towards Anuradhapura. Chapter 9: Invasions from the South, the Dravidian Threat. For centuries, Anuradhapura stood at the center of a flourishing civilization, but its location close to the northern coast of Sri Lanka made it vulnerable. The threat came not from the interior, but from across the sea, South India. From the Tamil kingdoms of the Pandayans and Cholas, waves of invasions periodically descended upon the island, disrupting the city's stability and shaking the foundations of the kingdom. These weren't minor raids. At times, entire armies crossed the Palk Strait, seeking not just loot, but control over Anuradhapura itself. One of the most significant early threats came during the reign of King Valagamba. In 103 BCE, Tamil invaders overthrew him, forcing him into exile for over a decade. His eventual return and reclamation of Anuradhapura was legendary, a testament to both royal resilience and the fragile nature of the kingdom's security. Subsequent centuries saw more incursions. The Pandyans were particularly persistent. Their interest in Anuradhapura was both strategic and economic. Controlling Sri Lanka's northern ports and its fertile interior was highly lucrative. What I find remarkable, visiting the city's ruins, is how little of this turbulent history remains visible in stone. The great stupas and monasteries still stand, silent witnesses to invasions long past. Yet, beneath the surface, these conflicts left their mark. Disrupted trade routes, economic decline, and a steady erosion of royal authority. Each invasion weakened the kingdom a little more. Even when local kings managed to repel the attackers, the cost of war in resources, infrastructure, and lives took its toll. More critically, these invasions exposed a deeper vulnerability. Anuradhapura's reliance on central control over its irrigation, trade, and religious institutions meant that disruptions quickly reverberated across the entire kingdom. In the next chapter, we'll explore how these external pressures combined with internal divisions gradually led to the decline of one of South Asia's greatest ancient cities. Chapter 10: Decline of the ancient city, internal weakness and external pressure. By the dawn of the second millennium, the grandeur of Anuradhapura was visibly fading. The city that once stood at the heart of a kingdom and the soul of a civilization now found itself in a slow, relentless decline. This fall wasn't the result of a single catastrophe, but rather the convergence of two powerful forces: internal weakness and external pressure. Internally, the once strong monarchy had fractured. Dynastic disputes, palace intrigues, and the constant struggle for succession weakened the central authority. Kings who should have been builders and reformers were instead preoccupied with holding onto power, often relying on shifting alliances with rival monasteries or regional warlords. The religious institutions themselves, once the pillar of stability, became part of the problem. The great monasteries of Mahavihara, Abhayagiri, and Jetavana were locked in long-standing rivalries, competing not just over doctrine but over land, wealth, and influence at court. The unity that had once defined Anuradhapura's religious life had splintered, contributing to the fragmentation of the kingdom. Externally, the threat from South India loomed larger than ever. Raids and invasions grew more frequent and more organized. Tamil mercenaries, once employed by Sri Lankan kings as soldiers, sometimes turned into opportunistic conquerors themselves. The Pandyan and Chola empires, at their height, were far stronger and more aggressive than in earlier centuries. Anuradhapura's centralized infrastructure, once its strength, now became its weakness. Its vast irrigation systems required constant maintenance and state oversight. As royal power crumbled, these networks began to fail. Fields dried up, harvests dwindled, trade routes fell into disrepair. I remember walking through parts of Anuradhapura where ancient canals and reservoirs lie dry, silent reminders of an age when this city mastered its landscape. In its decline, that mastery was lost. By the 10th century, it was clear Anuradhapura's era was drawing to a close, yet the final blow was yet to fall. In the next chapter, we'll witness the dramatic end, the Chola invasion that sealed Anuradhapura's fate, and the city's eventual abandonment to the jungle. Chapter 11: The Fall of Anuradhapura, Chola Invasion and Abandonment. The final chapter of Anuradhapura's long story came not through gradual decline alone, but with a decisive crushing blow from across the sea. In 993 CE, the powerful Chola Empire of South India launched a full-scale invasion of Sri Lanka, and this time Anuradhapura would not recover. Led by Raja Chola I, the Cholas were at the height of their military and naval power. Their ambitions extended far beyond their homeland. Sri Lanka, rich in resources and strategic ports, was an obvious target. The Cholas crossed the port strait with a massive army and advanced swiftly towards Anuradhapura. When the invaders reached the city, they did not merely occupy it, they sacked it. Temples were looted, stupas were defiled, and the once proud city was stripped of its treasures. The hydraulic infrastructure that had sustained Anuradhapura for centuries was systematically destroyed. In historical terms, this wasn't just a military conquest, this was a deliberate dismantling of a civilization. What's striking is that after the Chola conquest, Anuradhapura was not rebuilt. The Sinhalese kings, retreating to the south, established a new capital at Polonnaruwa, choosing to abandon Anuradhapura entirely. Perhaps the trauma of its fall was too great, or perhaps the logistical challenges of restoring its irrigation works were too overwhelming. When I walked among the ruins, I felt the weight of that abandonment. There is something haunting about a city left to the forest, its great dagobas rising silently above the trees, its stone causeways broken and overgrown. For over a millennium, Anuradhapura had been the spiritual and political heart of Sri Lanka. Its sudden end marked not just the fall of a city, but the close of an entire chapter in the island's history. In the next chapter, we'll look at what happened to Anuradhapura after its fall, how this once great city, lost to the jungle, was rediscovered and restored in modern times. Chapter 12: Rediscovering Anuradhapura, from ruins to world heritage. For nearly 1,000 years after its fall, Anuradhapura lay forgotten, its stone monuments hidden beneath layers of jungle and time. But cities of such grandeur are never lost forever. Slowly, gradually, the ancient capital re-emerged, first as a place of quiet pilgrimage, then as an object of archaeological curiosity, and finally as a symbol of national heritage. Even during its abandonment, Anuradhapura's spiritual significance endured. The Sri Mahabodhi, that ancient sacred tree planted over 2 millennia ago, was never forgotten. Pilgrims continued to visit it, tending its roots even as the surrounding city crumbled. In many ways, that tree kept Anuradhapura alive. In the 19th century, during the British colonial period, systematic efforts began to rediscover and restore the ancient city. Archaeologists cleared stupas, documented inscriptions, and mapped the remnants of reservoirs and monasteries. Work continues even today as new discoveries shed light on forgotten aspects of Anuradhapura's history. I recall walking those same stone pathways, seeing the massive Ruwanvelisaya, the now restored Abhayagiri, and the meditation platforms once used by monks centuries ago. It's an experience that brings history into the present. These aren't just ruins, they are the physical memories of a civilization. In 1982, Anuradhapura was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site, formally recognizing its place among the great cities of the ancient world. Today, it functions both as an archaeological site and as a living religious center. Monks chant beneath restored stupas, pilgrims circle sacred dagobas, and tourists from around the world explore what was once the heart of Sri Lanka. What makes Anuradhapura extraordinary in my view is its dual identity. It is at once a site of scholarly research, a tourist destination, and a living spiritual landscape. Few places in the world embody such continuity across millennia. In the next and final part of this video, we'll reflect on what Anuradhapura means today and why its story continues to matter. Epilogue: A legacy carved in stone. Anuradhapura may have fallen, but its legacy endures not just in stone and sculpture, but in the identity of Sri Lanka itself. As I stood beneath the great stupas, beneath the ancient branches of the Sri Mahabodhi, I couldn't help but reflect on how few places in the world carry such an unbroken thread between past and present. Here, the rituals continue, the monks still chant, the pilgrims still walk the same path their ancestors once did centuries ago. But Anuradhapura is more than a site of faith. It is a reminder of human resilience and creativity, a city that mastered its environment through advanced irrigation, connected itself to faraway worlds through trade, and crafted monumental architecture that still defies time. For historians, archaeologists, and spiritual seekers alike, Anuradhapura offers more than just history. It offers perspective on how civilizations rise, how they endure, and how they are remembered. Today, visitors come from around the world to witness this ancient city. Yet, for the people of Sri Lanka, Anuradhapura is not just a relic of the past, it is a living symbol of cultural pride, spiritual continuity, and national identity. In the story of Anuradhapura, we find not just the history of a city, but the story of a people. And that's why Anuradhapura still matters.